Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Hizmet Talks. Today, as a co host of this program, I, with Dr. Ismail Sezgin, will be discussing the hotly debated topic of Gulenism, uh, the infiltration, the charge of infiltration against the Gulen movement or Hizmet movement, and the purge that followed the 2016 coup attempt in Turkey. Um, you're welcome, Dr. Ismail Sezgin. How are you
Thank
today?
you very much. I'm fine. It is good to be introduced by someone else. I specifically wanted this because many of the viewers last week, I think, presumed that it was one of the interviews that you were a guest. So I thought it would be a good idea maybe if you were the host and people would, understand that you're part and parcel of the program. Okay. Yeah. What are we
Yeah.
talking? You're
Mhm.
leading the debate today.
Yes. So, of course, as I just mentioned, the topic of discussion today is Gulenism, infiltration, and the purge. So, of course, this charge of infiltration against the Hizmet movement is something that is not new. It's not something that is limited to the AKP, but it has been leveled against the movement by the previous Kemalist regime too, the secularists in the country. They have alleged it that the Hizmet movement has this inspiration or aspiration to overtake the state, the staunchly secular state of Turkey. And of course, this allegation has now been also being used by the AKP against the Hizmet movement, and using this as a pretext, the uh, the government, the Erdogan regime, uh, is undertaking a massive crackdown against anyone affiliated with the movement. So of course this of late, this charge of late also came up in an article by the Economist, in which they also repeated those charges and actually used the language, let's say, of the Kemalists in Turkey. So what do you have to say about it? How do you think this charge, does it stick to the movement? And do you really think that the movement has that aspiration to take over the state in Turkey and become and undermine the secular character of the country?
I think, well, before I start, actually, maybe it should be an idea because partly you are slightly looking at this topic a bit from a distance. How would you see that? Is that a unique accusation, or, for instance, do you have similar accusations in India? People accusing other parties to infiltrate or to take over certain institutions, or is this something that we're talking genuinely Turkish and nowhere else can be another example?
No, I don't think so. I mean, of course, it has precedent, not only in Turkey but in other parts of the world too. This Such charges have been leveled against mostly the minorities
Hmm.
and perhaps those who are considered not the mainstream, not those there are of course in different parts of the world too. There are people who consider them as uh, the guardian of the state, or they think they have they are entitled to be in certain position. So this isn't, of course, unique to Turkey. We have precedent of such kind in India too, and of course, we lately saw that in the US and in other parts of the world. But of course, the level of persecution that has happened in Turkey because of this charge, perhaps not many countries has seen that in the recent history, in the recent past.
Yeah, I think
So
I think India might be, in a way, a good example of what I will try to explain because the term infiltration is a specific term. It has a lot to do about the current persecution in Turkey as well. Why the term infiltration is being used? It's not like overrepresentation in certain sectors. For instance, we know black people are not good represented in America, or even black minorities are not, black and minority ethnic communities in here, BMEs, are not well represented in state sector in here, in the United Kingdom. And probably in India, where there is a lot of nations, that would be a debate. And also, I think maybe because of the caste system that you have in your own history, and there is a remnant of dividing or describing people for various reasons. But in Turkey, I think if we were to go, I'll try to show some pictures with me. But unfortunately, there is a bit of, I don't know why this happened. Sorry. Okay. So if we were to take the infiltration in Oxford Dictionary, it is about enter or gain access to an organization or a place, but superstitiously and gradually, especially in order to acquire secret information. And then when they give an example, it's often, the example is like infiltrating to enemy. Yeah, so we're talking about these people, Gulenists or Hizmet Movement members, are considered as enemy or the other, the ultimate other in Turkey. And how come a Sunni Muslim majority country where Sunni Muslims can be considered as the ultimate other? So first of all, it's not in every place. It is what the regime considers as the strategic importance places, and most importantly, in the Kemalist stronghold of army. So in order to explain that, I actually found something, because it's hard to explain this to many people. This is a video, and it's repeated as a ceremony for many years. As many people would know, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk has actually established the Turkish state, and it is argued that Mustafa Kemal also gave the custodianship of the Turkish state to the army. So the army are supposed to involve and adjust stuff when it is needed. So I'm not sure whether you will hear the sound, but to try to exemplify this, how you can take this, I was hoping that maybe you will hear this. I'm not sure, but part of that ceremony, for instance, these new army cadets, when they are sworn in for their duties after their graduation, there is like everyone's number read up, and everyone stand up and say present. And when it comes to number 1283, which I can probably, you can hear it now. Yes, it's a bit echo maybe. Now this number. So what's happening here is the entire Turkish cadets actually are instructed that 1283, which is Mustafa Kemal's original number, is all of them. So they respond as his insiders. So every military officer in Turkey is a little Mustafa Kemal. So anyone who doesn't share this ideology, no matter whether he's got citizenship rights or not, is not a Kemalist. Hence, he shouldn't be in there, because that is the guardian or the owner, the people who are behind the curtain. And I can give more examples, like for instance, really senior people like explaining this very clearly. If we don't want anything, it wouldn't. And in practice, in 1960, after Mustafa Kemal, like 12 years after him, the army intervened and removed the Popular Democrat Party at that time, who replaced the Republican Party of Mustafa Kemal, and who brought some religious freedom. He removed them, and actually they hanged the prime minister and two other ministers who they hold accountable for the changes in Turkey in the country of Mustafa Kemal's vision, or the Kemalism. And in the 1970s, there has been another intervention. In 1982, there is another intervention. In between, there are soft interventions. And 1997 to 1999, there is this postmodern coup, which changed the government and created a huge structure in Turkey and give military a lot of power. They literally run the tanks in the streets to scare the government off. And then later on, of course, this has remained for a long time with the European Union accession. That has been reduced a bit. But at that period, there has been a consistent claim within the Kemalist army that no one should go in there. So they actually they actually, sorry, I'll have to, is there in any way echo or anything? No, that's fine. So they
No.
actually what they did is they ensured that no people from religious background can come into the army. And no person from with a religious background should come into the army. They ensured that with certain background checks and like visiting places. For a long time, it wasn't accessible for common people to be able to even apply for it in any way. But within the Hizmet movement, and it is encouraging, especially let's say rural communities, to invest in their children's education, providing scholarships and other issues since 1970s, now 50 years or more. A lot of people actually there has been an upward social mobilization, and a lot of rural people gain access to these strongholds. I think for that reason they call this as an infiltration. They are not supposed to be there, and they are infiltrating, and it is not accepted. The other problem in here is that every year in August, the army used to get rid of some people who they have recognized that have some religious practice tendencies or some sort of an observant. I actually once check out Pakistani chief of staff names and the Turkish chief of staff names, respectively, two Muslim countries. And one of them, you would have a lot of Muhammads and this and that. In this one, you wouldn't have them. You would have more, let's say, more secular names. It's not coincidence that you have very few people name really religious tone, but more İlker Başbu and this and that, and you would have a lot of them. But anyway, so this is the problem. But the other issue in here is that the current purge numbers suggest that in Turkey there is almost like I'll have to check my numbers here. There isn't a huge number of people that actually identified as Gulenism. Like they are scaring the numbers, but there is like one of course the number is growing, but 125,678 people, when I checked for my article, which I'll publish hopefully soon, has been purged, allegedly because of their affiliation of Gulenism, but we know that at least 10-20% of this is like Kurdish, Alevi, or different background opposition people. So it looks like a big number, 125,000. But in Turkey, at that year that the government purged this many people, there was 3,600,405 civil servants. In fact, that number, I can actually show that number on the screen if I can. Let me see whether I have it. Yeah, I have the current number. I can show it in the screen. Where is this? Here it is. So, for instance, currently what you would see in Turkish here, this is the number you're looking at. The total number is 4.6 million people. So this is the total in 50 years, the most educated group in Turkish society. And this is again another recent article here. Sorry, not that one. Yeah, this one. This is actually a very recent article. I'm just gonna translate it. But for instance, in comparison, it says the Gulen movement people plus 90% of them are highly educated, university graduated. Here are the numbers. Yeah, more than 90% of these people are university graduated in that identified Gulenist members. But Turkish average is 10% university graduates, 13% never attend any school. So within this group, only in 50 years, we're talking about 3% of the entire bureaucracy, or less, in however you measure it. Like, because since the coup attempt, these people are purged, but maybe 3 or 4 times more people have been employed to extend their base and to employ more people from their own party and everything. So I think it's a bit exaggeration. Yeah, I mean, like in general, there is a lot of argument that suggests that Gulen movement people are taking over the state. but it is not, it's not based on the real numbers, because before this coup attempt, there was arguments that the movement's maybe follower base is like 400,000, 500,000 people. Among this is a small number, 1/5 of it maybe, and its influence base is estimated between 3 to 6 million, depends on which source you are looking at that time. Within that 6 millions of influence base, if you've got a fraction of it, again less than 3%, is really because they are educated and they can have access, especially when AK Party came into power, of course, because some of these selective processes have been dismissed, and the new exam systems came into power, and a lot of people actually managed to have a fairer chance to access this. So I think it's a bit overrated. The number of Gulenists, according to the state numbers that says, let's say 120,000 plus, is in comparison to the exact number of entire bureaucratic cadres that Turkish state employs, which is 4.6 million today, is a very small fraction, and it's not scary at all. It's actually asks a question. It begs the question, well, if this is only 3% is the most educated Muslim Sunni background people, what is the rest of them? What is the 97% of them are actually? That brings us Turkish division of white Turks and black Turks, who are considered as black, second class, and shouldn't be in there. Yeah, that's my answer to that, Behzad, if you...
Sure. Thank you for this very detailed answer to that question. But let's go back to a few concepts first, since we're talking about infiltration, as you also said, that infiltration is something that is considered when someone is trying to enter a group or an organization that is enemy. When you see that, you enter it, and you then try to take hold of the situation. So in this case, when this allegation of infiltration is being leveled against the uh, volunteers, participants, or members of the Hizmet movement, are they not the citizens of the country? Do they not have that right to take positions in the Turkish state? Is it anyhow illegal for any religious organization to take a position or aspire to become a civil servant in state bureaucracy? So if it's not, I mean, why do you think the Turkish government is using this term infiltration? Is it just because there's a certain section of the society, section in the country, that think that they only have the prerogative to be in certain positions, and anyone else apart from them are simply not entitled. They don't have any right to come and be a colleague to them.
I see. I mean, to be honest, there is a certain degree of acceptance in certain sectors. Yeah. If you want to be a small businessman, shop owner, run a coffee shop, these are fine. If you want to be, let's say, like there was a time where even being a teacher and practicing Muslim was a problematic issue. Many people would tell you that. And I know during my high school education, most of my teachers used to not be very open about their religious practice, and they would hide it even if they are attending Juma prayers. Their principals would cover for them, for instance, look favorably, but system was not in favor of them. You don't want to be known as religiously practicing Muslim civil servant. But the problem, because of the way the Mustafa Kemal's ideals have been interpreted as Kemalism, and this establishing group that benefited mostly from its fruits, didn't want to share initially none of it. Then some sectors are open. You can be a civil servant in, let's say, interior ministry here and there, but there has been a gradual protection against the foreign ministry, has been known as Kemalist stronghold, until Abdullah Gulen's intervention until he came into power. It's been a very typical group of people always hold the power in there, and they made sure that every interviewed person has a culture of what wine would be fine with red meat and this and that, sort of like a very, very limited number of society can only achieve those sort of criterias. And apart from that, also military was one of the really, really very strict stronghold. I wasn't prepared for this, but I could have opened. I can even Google search in front of you and find out a video where 3 cadets have been found practicing, Islamic duties in a house in the weekend, and hence they have been dismissed from the military and forced to pay all their education up to that point. And this used to be usual, normal. I mean, not long ago, 20 years ago, this is what makes Erdogan's appeal in the religious majority in Turkey is very strong, is because when I went to visit my brother's sworn-in ceremony, my brother was a normal compulsory military private. When we went to Bilecik, my mother was wearing a headscarf, and she was not allowed to the stadium that thousands of privates that are sworn in to protect the homeland against invasion. And they are private soldiers, yeah, after 1 month of education. My mother was not allowed in that stadium, the open stadium. Thousands of families were there. If you refuse to take away your headscarf, you can't even see your child is sworn in to become a military officer. And this is not very, very long ago, like 10, 15 years ago we're talking about. I mean, for these sort of specific places, there is a very, very clear understanding, and it's somehow it is shared. It's understood by most of the majority as well. In their mindset, at least, it's thought to them that they shouldn't be there. In fact, when Gulen, as a state preacher, when he was preaching to Muslim wider community to say, why don't you go and take part in civil servant? It is halal for you to do so, yeah, and it is a citizenship duty, and it was in a way welcomed by some parts, but really disliked by many, especially backed with education, backed with scholarships and students having an opportunity to educate, unless which otherwise they wouldn't be able to. They managed to break some barriers and get into some places, which is most disliked by the secular establishment. I think in 1997 they started persecuting on Gulen movement actively, part of the reason of the soft postmodern coup attempt at that time. And then there was a long case about Fethullah Gulen, and not only on Fethullah Gulen, but maybe we forgot, but even Erdogan and some other Islamist or Muslim leaders have been punished, put into prison. Harun Yahya and others, at that period, a lot of religious figure has been put into prison because of their religious affiliation and their religious understanding. So I think that concept of other that puts conservative practicing Muslims in a bad situation is defining that terminology where you are considered as enemy. I have, for instance, I've graduated from international relations. I have never even considered to join in foreign ministry, because in my early education, I have a madrasa education, which I have a certificate, which the state knows about it. I have no chance, no need to even try. I think that is the main reason behind it, and how there isn't a caste system or an open issue about it, but there are some theses, there are some articles that you can find. Sherif Mardin wrote about the center and periphery relationship in Turkey, these periphery rural communities and their struggle to come into center and take part from the wider opportunities of Turkey, and which has always been an issue for a conflict, which we are seeing now. The periphery has taken over, or still taking over, the country, and in a way the Kemalist central points are trying to fight back by any means necessary.
Right. So, of course, one of the things that Fethullah Gulen said previously is that as Muslims in Turkey, as Turkish Muslims, you should not always be in the witness box in a court, yet in a courthouse. Rather, you can also become a judge. And likewise, he says that you should not always be a patient in a hospital. You can also be a doctor. Uh, and these things be professional in this world, and you can also be a good practicing Muslim. So one of the charges that is often leveled against Hizmet movement is that even if you don't, the presence of Hizmet volunteers in different state institutions were not too large, but whatever it was, they were in strategic positions. Like there was an attempt to take over institutions like police, judiciary, and military. And therefore they say that the overall what they were trying to do in Turkey is to take over these institutions, which actually where is being controlled in the country, and therefore it also had political ambitions. So what do you have to say about it?
First of all, I think I have to rephrase what you said because most of it was, for a strange reason, was not very clear. Maybe it's about my internet connection, but I'm not sure. I don't know why that is.
Yeah, there was this was frozen. Yeah, I
Maybe this would be solving the problem. So I think you said, in a nutshell, you said, of course, it's known that Gulen has encouraged people to take part in state sector as well. Don't become only witness or a patient, become a doctor and a judge as well. But specifically, there was a
right.
strategic importance given to, let's say, military and judiciary. Did you say? Like a.
Yes, police, military, and
Yeah, I mean
judiciary.
that comes
Yeah,
up.
this is
Probably you're reading those sort of stuff as much as I do. I mean, in fact, they say as well, police, military, and judiciary. I mean, how do you take that? Like for instance, I mean, like I have some numbers about that that actually doesn't match with the argument. But does it come sensible to you that there is such a specific attempt on these institutions? I mean, from.
um well, yeah. Mhm. Of course, there was this charge against Fethullah Gulen that he's trying to undermine the secular character of Turkey, and which was launched against that investigation was launched against him in the aftermath of the 1997 postmodern coup, and then he was, acquitted by the Turkish courts in 2008 of all these charges. So this was a time when, of course, the judiciary of country was staunchly secular. There is no doubt that people say that when AKP came to power, uh, the Hizmet movement or Jamaat also became very strong, and because it was in alliance, there was a coalition between the Hizmet movement and the AKP, and therefore many people also at that time infiltrated the state and entered the judiciary too. But it's really difficult to believe that within the span of 6 years, the Hizmet movement became so powerful in the Turkish judiciary that it acquitted Fethullah Gulen of all these charges. It was actually it is simply not rational to think so, or to argue so. So of course the judiciary was strong even at that time.
For the
The
Kemalists, you
and I
mean?
mean the Kemalists, yes, the Kemalists were strong in the Turkish judiciary, and they acquitted, Fethullah Gulen because they had no hard evidence against him of any attempt to undermine the secular character of the state. So I don't think it is true that the judiciary was totally under Hizmet's control or Gulen's control. And even if there were some members, you can't really say that the whole institution of judiciary in Turkey was under Hizmet's control. It is, of course, an exaggeration.
I think, but because you're a bit familiar, maybe you find that, and then you remember that, for instance, well, if these people are in power and enjoying the peak of their power, how come their leader can be still in court? Many people forget that actually in 2006, when they first acquitted Gulen, they said, okay, we couldn't find any crime against the state or anything in those terms. But if you repeat, if you come again second time, we'll charge you. And then people said, well, hold on a second. If you couldn't find any crime, you have to either acquit us or incriminate us. Just give us a verdict. We haven't done, if we have done any wrong, the solicitor at that time, if our client did anything wrong, punish him, or if he's not, acquit him. There is no like, okay, we'll let you go, and there is no crime, but if you come again for the same reason, we'll punish you, sort of. So then they had to reluctantly acquit him because all these cases goes to European Human Rights Court as well. There was a relatively more secure judiciary system, a more fair judiciary system within the international boundaries at the time. Now the president says that European Human Rights Court is not binding, sort of like very recently. And this argument that, okay, there may not be too many Gulenist or Gulen movement member in the bureaucracy, but they were all concentrated on strategic institutions. Yeah, but it's a very, very basic fact of checking numbers. You can find these numbers on Turkey, Purge, and other. Actually, if you are patient enough, you can read through all the government decrees and find out these numbers that I'm going to mention. I'll put them into practice and see really is that argument holds water, because the economists use that argument, and I actually raised some of the issues at the time. So, for instance, there are in the judiciary, police, and in the army, the numbers are for judiciary 3,926 people purged. That is around 30% of the whole judiciary. Yeah. And this is the highest percentage that you will find among these institutions. And there is 30,000 then, when I was looking for this argument, but 33,000, maybe now more, police officers have been purged from the police force, which at that time, in July 2016, there was 200 and, what's the number? 200 and I think 50,000 police officers. Among them, only 30,000. So it is like 11-12% of the entire police force. A very small number, and a police force is relatively an easy place to go. As I said, it's not strategic enough. It's like daily chores. But when it comes to army, it's even more interesting, because at that time when I was doing this, there was like 13,000 army officers were purged, and later it goes up to 19,000. And in Turkish army, people who are paid in lower ranks and higher ranks, people who are not doing compulsory business, I think it's around 260,000. The numbers are changing, and recently it is getting bigger. So it is again a very small percentage, less than 10%, and only if you consider all these people as Gulenists as well. We can't guarantee. There should be at least 10 to 20%. There are very famous cases like Nuri Akman and others, like leftist and other opposition groups who doesn't agree with government, have been purged because of because the government had the power to do, and they're fighting to get their jobs back. So in every profession, we would expect a similar percentage might not be Gulenist as well. We should consider that. But even if you assume all of them are Gulenist, the percentages are very, very low, except the judiciary. And I don't have a power to check out whether that is true. But the thing is, if you were to check the numbers of people, the judges and prosecutors that have been kicked out of their position in 1982 coup attempt, you will find a very similar number in terms of judiciary, because there is, like, all this persecution happens via judiciary, and they need to scare the judges so they can pull back in line according to government. And 1/3 of the judiciary is a big number to scare the remaining 2/3. Whether voluntarily or not, they'll have to obey. They'll have to be political. They'll have to look at what government wants them. But there are some other numbers. In fact, if this was about the purge, then they have get rid of, let's say, almost 4,000 judges, 3,900 judges, but they have employed 9,000 judges on top of the existing number. Yeah. So it is clearly about dominating the strategic infrastructures, not only purging or cleansing in their own terms from the religiously affiliated people, which they clearly say this as well. It's a struggle against all the religious groups and minorities in Turkey. Otherwise, you wouldn't see the relationship between why Harun Yahya have been charged with a lot of charges individually, but also charged with abetting and supporting the Gulenists, because it's a brand that sticks. So similar to that, for instance, I said 33,000 police officers have been purged out of 250,000 people, less than 10% or around 11%. Sorry, and then instead there is 115,000 police officers, and the watchmen, what they called, have been employed. And of course, during this period, one of the people who is watching, he said 50% of the generals and 73% of all the high-level generals have been purged. Yeah, that is true. That is where it gets messy, because it makes it very much more complicated. That it looks like the government had a chance to actually entirely redesign army, and it's taking the chances because there is no one to question it. Most of these people, 50% of the generals and 73% of the higher ranked people, haven't actually taken part or in fact fought against the coup attempt, but they have been purged and they have no access to go back. So the remainder of people feel themselves forced to stay loyal. When I say this argument to the economists, someone said, well, they're talking about high-ranking people, not necessarily in that institution. So that's another diversion, when you have to say it very clearly. So I looked, and the only institution I don't know very well is the military. How does it work? I haven't done even my military service, so I don't know much information. I don't really understand the numbers in there. But I looked at the judiciary. It's less than 7% in higher judges. The rest is basic people, like prosecutors and judges recently get into position. And in the police force, it is even worse. We know that there is a number of people, university graduates, had the chance to become police officers. So there is a lot of low-level police officers, but among the purged people, the higher-ranking people are a very small minority again. So it doesn't hold water as well. Within the army, the only thing that actually is problematic in there, yes, a lot of high percentage people have been purged, but that brings another question. If we were to assume that is purely because of Gulenism, clearly they haven't taken part in the coup attempt, which is supposed to be Gulenist, or resisted or fought against it, or suppressed the coup attempt, but they have been still purged. So there might be a sense in there to take control in the army. So I don't think that is a real that verifiable information. I know it is used a lot too by the Kemalist sources, mainly used a lot to scare their Western counterparts. But I asked them to go on, check out the numbers. I can actually show the numbers that I'm looking here. These are of course, like 6 months old. They might be different, but you can look at these numbers. You can look at these numbers and see, respectively, it's not as good enough point to create a huge scaremongering, but it's a securitization issue. Like if people make you scared about heinous group and their strategic things. And when you look at the numbers and see that's not the case, and that, well, they may be, higher levels. And when you look at those numbers, that's even more tragic. It's not true as well. Well, it doesn't matter, we get rid of them. But based on what? For instance, you can explain, okay, these people potentially may create another coup attempt. You can explain military, but I think Garrett Jenkins first asked the question, why 33,500 police officers didn't support in any way the coup attempt, fought back against the pushes people, and and then 6 months later purged anyway. So you have to see that the Erdogan regime is trying to consolidate it by, like the almost McCarthyism, picking out people and institutions and getting rid of them. So I don't find it factually correct. I mean, anyone who claims that numbers have to be really careful, because, I mean, everything is not in the dust anymore. We can actually find out numbers and check, cross-reference them, and even the economists can make huge mistakes, and which is, I think, very disrespectful to their readers, because they think that is, if Economist or the Times said that, it should be true, but it's not necessarily, because they are not verifying. Like BBC Hard Talk, watch Erdogan versus Zeynep Badawi. Erdogan said there is only 3 persons in jail because of journalism, very recently. And Zeynep Badawi didn't say, name them please. Who are these 3 people? Yeah, because I could name 10 people there because of journalism, But it's like they're not verifying, I think. So I think that is another distorted truth. I'm not saying there isn't any truth. I mean, like, the movement should look into its influence on the bureaucracy overall. You can compare those numbers. That's a different topic. But the way it is presented is not right, not healthy.
Of course, for reporters and journalists interviewing important people, it is very important to have follow-up questions. Any argument that is being made by them, you have to come up with follow-up questions for that. So one thing that I wanted to ask here. So you're saying that the Hizmet movement, that not all people that have been purged from the judiciary, police, or military are necessarily affiliated with the Hizmet movement. There are others too who have been targeted by the Erdogan regime. So, but still, there are hundreds and thousands of Hizmet volunteers or Gulen sympathizers who have been purged, who have been, fired from their jobs. So, which professions would you say most of these people were in, if not in the police, judiciary, or military? Where were they? Do you have any statistics about that too?
Well, actually, that's my other issue. For instance, okay, if this is not true, what is the real number? Who is the most impacted group in here within the Hizmet movement? I think this is the most strange information here, because overall, all these strategic places, although you can see the value of it by getting rid of a police officer, government employs 3 others from his party base. So it's also consolidating its power. Similar to that, they're trying to do a very, very long-term plan about the military redesign as well. And similar to that, for instance, in judiciary as well, probably, they are hiring 3 times more judges and prosecutors than they have purged. So there is a clear changing of power in the bureaucracy as well. So more pro-government affiliated people are coming. And most of world media is actually putting their projectors onto this in this institution. So among 120,000, when it was 125,000 bureaucrats, there are some unaccounted numbers that are affected. For instance, let's say overall, I calculated the numbers of teachers. This is the biggest chunk of the purged people because of their relegation to Hizmet Movement. That's another strange issue. There's a coup happened by military, and the punishment goes to all the spectrum of everybody, whether they have had anything to do or not. And I calculated 65,000 plus teachers, academics, and other stuff, and plus 30,000 school workers, dormitory workers, or all the people who are, like in working all these institutions. So around like 100,000 people, because this is not among the 125,000 government decree numbers, because within those decrees, the government, for instance, decided to close down 102,084 schools. So no names are in that list. No staff members are in that list. So we don't know exact numbers. So we'll have to figure them out. So that is on top of 125,000 the government civil servants. On top of that, this institution, like 835 dormitories, loads of people lost their job. They are indirect victims of the purge, and 15 universities, 54 hospitals. So a lot of indirect people in here. But the biggest chunk is around 100,000 people. I think that constitutes like either 35 or 40% of entire Hizmet spectrum. This is a different calculation. I have it for another reason. I think I calculated uh, either 371,000 people or 271,000 people. I can't remember exactly. I could probably open that quickly as well and check that as well, so I don't give the wrong number. Anyway, when I do that, I'll share it. But I can't even remember what was the name of it. But anyway, so there is 30 to 40% of these people are education sector. There is a small amount, like it's a relatively large amount again, like 50,000 people almost about business sector. So that is like half of them.
Mm-hmm.
And various others like medical sector and this and that. But by far, they are the greatest victims of the purge. So it actually, the data speaks volumes in there that, well, it is true that the movement is essentially an education movement, because when it comes to persecution, you see the biggest bill has been paid by the teachers and the academics and the support staff in the schools, and not mentioned very well as well. There are a lot of charity workers, around 5,000 media sector as well, but it's a huge purge that affected many people. But the fact that they're concentrating on the judiciary, army, and police to scare off people, to create a bigger threat than it is. I mean, you can create a certain amount, but you don't need to exaggerate that.
Right. So this isn't it very interesting that before the AKP came to power, the Kemalist regime too used to purge religious people in the military, at least. I mean, let's give the example of military. There was this concept of irtija,
Mhm.
where the military, where thousands of people were purged every year from the military because of their religious sentiments, or because of their religious beliefs or practices. But the AKP, which actually came to power, promising that it would, it would take care of the rights, or give the rights to of the marginalized people in the country, or those who have been discriminated against in the country. Uh, they came to power. They became so powerful, and slowly, gradually became authoritarian. And now they themselves are somehow persecuting the same segment of the people, the same section of the people, those who were persecuted or discriminated against by the Kemalists. So, for example, Gulen movement is not the only organization, not only not it's not the only religious movement that has been targeted by the Erdogan regime. You gave example of Harun Yahya, but also Alparslan,
Kuytul,
Kuytul
yeah.
of Adana. Yeah, he was jailed twice. I mean, he was jailed, and after spending some time in jail, he was released, and then he made some statement, and again he was jailed. You know, so it's not only the Hizmet movement which has been persecuted by the Erdogan regime, but also the uh, also other religious organizations. So this is very important to understand. People outside of Turkey, they generally think that you know in in Turkey there is this Kemalist. I mean, especially this understanding is especially in the Muslim communities outside of Turkey, that the Turkish government is fighting a battle against the Kemalist legacy, the Kemalist regime, still as if the Kemalist regime is very strong, and they are trying to uh, persecute, target, or marginalized the AKP, which has its roots in Islamism, and therefore these things are happening. Therefore, the judicial coup in 2013 happened, and therefore the attempted military coup in 2016 happened, and they want to overthrow this Muslim government, a government which is actually supporting the cause of Muslims and has actually strengthened them in the country. But it's really baffling to see that the so-called Muslim government, the so-called pious Muslim leader of Turkey, is actually targeting and persecuting and the uh, targeting the religious people again, those who do not agree with his policies and his governance, and those who are not loyalists. Simply, anybody who is criticizing the government is becoming anti-national, let's say. And this is also very important, that the Erdogan presented himself as a very pious religious person who himself was persecuted for reciting a religious poem in a public meeting, right? That is what he was also jailed, and this of course gained him a lot of sympathy in the Turkish public eye. But using this division, using and having being very aware of this division in the Turkish society, that the Kemalist elites and the normal religious, the conservatives of Turkey have this division. He is actually actively, abusing it, using it, exploiting this division for his own political benefit, isn't he?
I think you're very right about that. I mean, like, there is a number of things that you highlighted. One of them is that, let's say 10, 15 years ago, even 2013 and before, when there was that e-muhtara, when government put something, so when the military put something online and retracted that to give a message to government at that time, to give a signal that they could intervene, like not long ago. Uh, there was this problem of what it is, backwardness, or it's called irtijar, people who wants to go back before Atatürk, let's say, however you, or back to Middle Ages, to Arabian Peninsula, however you identify, they call them as uh, who are trying to go backward, irtijar. And then if you just change the term irtijar with FETÖ, this is exactly overlapping. The target group is exactly overlapping. It's not only Gulen movement. It is in fact the biggest persecution probably happens to Sunni Muslim Kurds, because there is another fold of persecution putting Kurdish people into line, and happens to be Sunni Muslims discriminated in all these positions that we talked about and everything. They are not um, well accepted into positions as well, and they happen to be Kurd on top of it, so which is a very unfortunate situation. So I think that persecution that persecuted Erdogan before he came into power, as part of Irtija and persecuted Fethullah Gulen and persecuted others at that time, and forced some of them into submission and whatever, is now still in there, but this time the execution of that plan or that persecution happens by with the hands of an Islamic regime, an Islamist regime, an Islamist politician, Erdogan, which makes the majority of country to be silent about it. So the problem what was for the military, for the seculars before, when they tried to ban hijab in the universities, there was a big backlash at the societal level, so they couldn't sustain that. When they tried to stop their rights to take part in the state structures and different, the AK Party gained power. Islamist parties increased their power from 20% to 40%. So every time they push, actually it bounced back, because there is a population, a majority population who wants certain rights, and which brings Erdogan into power. And Erdogan maintains that power until it becomes corrupt. And when it becomes corrupt, and before he becomes corrupt, losing certain, let's say, collaborations with Alevites and Kurds and then Gulenists and different groups, but gaining more financial power and more resources to fight for their cause. But they had to re-establish a new sort of a coalition to stay in the power. I think this is it is a Kemalist secular support, not all of them of course, but some of them are supporting Erdogan so that he can do this restructuring of the society, pull people into line and into described lines for them, so they can push back. So Erdogan, for instance, sells a different narrative to Western countries. He's trying to say Fethullah Gulen was about to bring Sharia, and he's an Islamist. He's more dangerous than Osama bin Laden. He's like, in favor of Sharia and whatever. Hence, we should stop him. And when he goes to Pakistan, he says these are, horrible people. They actually are not real Muslims. They literally use, this apostate terminology as well, and they actually helped Kemalists to persecute real Muslims, so we're getting rid of them as well. So it is based on the audience. He shapes his narrative.
Yeah.
And that's how he gets the popular support. So because many people wouldn't know what exactly he is doing, what is his policies, who is he imprisoning, what's happening in Turkey, they would just think, well, there might be something, so he has done that. There might be something wrong, so he has done that. And there is a good history that gives him a lot of credit. I mean, like, many people don't know, but when he came into power 2002, the United States wanted to invade Iraq, and they wanted to open a new front from Turkish southern border. And Erdogan fought very hard to make that happen. But the Turkish parliament denied Erdogan's request and his pressure, because Erdogan promised America that, United States. But the Turkish parliament denied that. So Turkish people got this credible status, for instance, and everyone assumed Erdogan did that. Everyone around the world would remember it as if Erdogan didn't let America to use Turkish bases, which is quite strange, but for politically it is a very, very smart move. So he plays the audience very well. I mean, but what is happening is, because of his troubles in corruption allegations, he's actually trying to forge new relationships so he can stay a bit longer in the power. He can transform some other power centers like military. He can balance it out with militia, and he can balance it out with a lot of police officers. What he's doing is, actually, there are thousands and thousands of people, both in the military and the police and other sectors, that really relies Erdogan to remain in power. If he is gone, they're gone as well. So they are going to make sure that Erdogan stays in the power. I think it's the sad reality of Turkey, and this is actually just a playground about it. Like, so, even today, they can get rid of anyone they like. There is a corruption going on. For instance, if there are some prosecutors with police officers, they would join hands and go and get some extortion from any businessman, because they would say, okay, if you don't give us money, we'll say you are Gulenist and we'll take over everything. And by the time you explain yourself, it's going to be too late. I think I want to show one thing.
So
one thing, if you
yeah.
about the before, this is the data that I gathered. If you want to see, it's 37.9 people were education. That's almost 40%. 20% from business. Of course, the numbers might slightly different, but I don't think there would be 12% police officers. Among the Purge people, 270,000 people who have been persecuted directly or indirectly. The numbers might be even greater than this, of course. And the rest, other bureaucracy, as I put 10%, various bureaucratic places. 5% or 6% of the entire Purge people are army related. I put the military students here because their schools are closed. They're not necessarily persecuted as Gulenists. Some of them are, but it's just a different set of persecution. They're put into different universities. So there is like around 5,000, which is like 1.8% of media workers. And also judiciary is the least, although the number is within the judiciary is big. Yeah.
Right. So in one way or the other, the Erdogan regime is actually taking forward the agenda of the Kemalists, isn't it? I mean, if their agenda has always been to keep the practicing Muslims out of power, out of bureaucracy, out of the state institutions in Turkey, and if Erdogan regime is persecuting or purging rather the religious people from the state institutions, it is actually helping the Kemalist agenda in the country. So, I mean, of course, there's one point that you just mentioned, and it is very important, I think, is that for Erdogan to dismiss criticisms coming from the Kemalists or the secularists, the liberals in Turkey is very easy, isn't it? Because he can come in front of the people and can say that, see, these are the people, they are criticizing me because I am a Muslim, and they hate religion, they hate Islam, they hate your prophet. This is the language that he uses against Kemalists, and says that therefore they are calling me corrupt, therefore they are calling me authoritarian, therefore they are accusing me of eroding democracy, rule of law in the country, and freedom in the country. But when such a criticism against him comes from a respected social movement or Islamic movement like the Hizmet or the Gulen movement, or when it is coming from a reputed Islamic scholar like Fethullah Gulen, it becomes very difficult for Erdogan actually to anyhow dismiss it. Actually damages his reputation as a person who is a pious Muslim, a religious Muslim, and therefore it for Erdogan it becomes very important actually, and life-saving in one way or the other, to discredit the Hizmet movement and malign the reputation of Fethullah Gulen. So to say that, see, I mean, these were the people earlier, the Kemalists were criticizing me because they hate religion, and therefore they are criticizing me because I'm a very good Muslim. And likewise, when Gulen is criticizing me, see, he is a terrorist, he's an American agent, he's a CIA agent, and all those things. And therefore, because America doesn't want a good Muslim in Turkey, and therefore Gulen, who is serving American interest, is criticizing me. So of course, he thought that it was very important for him to discredit the Hizmet movement and malign the image of Fethullah Gulen, for him to maintain his power, for him to maintain his image as a good Muslim, as a principled Muslim.
Definitely.
And therefore, I think it's one of the reasons why the Erdogan regime is going so harshly against the Hizmet movement. One of the reasons I think is this.
I think that is true. There is a logic behind it, I would say. I would say Erdogan would have taken on Gulen movement and other religious groups maybe later. Yeah, it was a matter of timing, because the way the Turkey is divided is, one side there is a secular, pro-secular people, whether they are religious or not. Most of them are not, maybe, but there is religious people who believe the secular values should remain in the governance. And there is this religious group. So within the religious group, if he can actually consolidate power and not challenged by anyone, he can always step on them and argue for the power, even overcome a civil war if needed. That's once he mentioned something similar in those terms. So, but within this group, people forget very quickly. But for instance, when there was this Mavi Marmara incident, there was a huge popularity around Erdogan and the way he take an aggressive stance against it, both in Turkey and abroad. And when Gulen...
Not only that, let me just add here, also his clash with President of Israel at World Economic Forum debate. The way he stormed out of that.
Yes, exactly.
Debate.
Exactly. I happened to be in Turkey at that day when he was coming back from Davos. I used to go regular haircuts and touch base with my PhD work in there. And then people were there to greet him in the airport. So it was a big deal. But here's the thing. When Gulen talked about that issue and criticized that approach and suggested that diplomacy should be used a bit more, it created a division within the Muslim majority. So some people said, hold on a second, what are we doing? And some people said, what the hell are you talking about? It's not right, we should be maintaining this power. But it was a stop. It was a division. It was a crack. And it immediately take away the popularity of the topic, or undivided popularity. And at that time, I remember Erdogan's senior officers used to say, well, Gulen should evaluate this statement and maybe apologize and make a new one. He doesn't understand what's going on here. They were saying that because they needed his active involvement and support. And for a politician, in order to convince wider Muslim majority, if you always need Fethullah Gulen and his media and his people to support you, and give you more airtime and this and that, it's not a position that you may want to remain. You're establishing your own media, but it's not as efficient, it's not as powerful, it's not as well established and whatever. So that was it. It was about time that Erdogan was going to, of course, consolidate his power by pushing Gulen out of the scene, which he did. But he was forced to do that because he was cornered with the corruption allegations. He almost lost his entire political career on that. So instead, he turned on to Kemalists, which he used to persecute, Ergenekon and Balyoz suspects, which some of them are convicted as well, especially in some cases, because they have admitted what they have done, some of them, and it's served their time as well, and said, okay, you don't like this Gulen, and now I have a reason not to have him around. Let's join forces. I think that's sort of like, in a broad terms, they started collaborating. First, Erdogan let all of them with the law. He declared the law and reduced their sentences. Like, if you serve a certain amount of time, you should be released. And they were all released. And then they started working on this issue. And we came to a situation where Erdogan successfully marginalized. This is one of the issues where I was publicly wrong. I thought it is easy to demonize Kurds, it is easy to demonize Kemalists, it's easy to demonize various groups within Turkish society for Erdogan. He can do that. Armenians, Georgians, whatever. But I thought it would be nearly impossible for Erdogan to demonize a mainstream Sunni Muslim group like Gulen. So it's a tough nut to crack, I thought. But he proved me wrong. And he actually managed to demonize so badly that the movement doesn't have a leg to stand on in Turkey. Not now, not next 5 to 10 years. I don't know after that. Of course, there'll be a certain amount of normalization, but I don't know what will happen. But he's playing his card right. So as a politician, he's achieving that. I don't know, like whether you want to continue on this topic or I would say infiltration might be, like let's stay on that topic because we will be talking about these issues coming weeks as well, isn't it? So.
Yes. So I think it's been over an hour.
Can you see
Maybe
the
we
comments, or shall you can't, maybe if you want to check the phone.
Well, I do see some comments here.
Yes. Let me see. There was one, I think.
Is there any question here?
That is not. There's one comment. It says people who worked at closed institutions are able to work in private institutions since 2017. The ones via decrees cannot really work anywhere, so it's not really same. I don't think it is same. I don't say it is same, but it is different in other ways as well. For instance, one day state purge people will get some sort of a compensation about it, and the private people won't get anything. They'll be just persecuted and no repercussions, because their schools are closed. Effectively, there is no one. Yes.
I mean, what this person is saying here is, of course, the secularists are not finding positions now in state institutions in Turkey under Erdogan, but we do know that especially since the last general elections, when the MHP, the AKP formed an alliance with MHP, the ultra nationalist party of Turkey. There is this certain amount of power that this very actually small political party in Turkey is now wielding in the country, isn't it? I mean, they are also having a lot of their loyalists in different state institutions.
I think when you said that, I think we should invite Savaş Genç to our program, maybe to make him talk, because many people don't understand the fact that 1%, 2%, 5%, 8% means a lot to Erdogan at the moment. Yes, he consolidated the Muslim majority, but the Muslim majority, even at Necmettin Erbakan time, was something 20% plus. Okay, Erdogan reached out a wider community when he set up Justice and Development Party. He reached out to Kurds, he reached out to Alevites, he reached out to Gulenists, he reached out almost anyone except Kemalists, let's say, okay, except CHP, the Republican Party's base. And with that coalition and with that, let's say, names supporting him, like Abdullah Gül, Abdul Latif Şener, and all of them are gone. See, he managed to broaden that coalition, come to power, did good work, increase his thing. But then he started to consolidate his financial and political power. So he started getting rid of even his own colleagues. He used a clause about 3 terms serving only to them, but not to himself. So he get rid of Abdullah Gül and Bülent Arınç and Abdullah Latif, all of the old people who established a party, who became a one-man party. So in that case, of course, his party shrunk down a bit. His base. He knows that, so he tried to actually top it up with Kurds, so created a peace process. It was very, very positive at the time. But then when he saw that it's not gonna work, he lost an election on that promise, almost, well, half. He had to force coalition and stuff. So he reset the system, gone for election, this time very hardcore nationalist with the Nationalist
Mm-hmm.
Party. And then now he's...
And also
Sorry?
between that period, between 7 June and November 1 elections in 2015, I think you're referring to that. The chaos that was ensued in the country, it was unprecedented, really.
Yes, I mean, like, people...
The terrorist attacks in different parts of the country, including in cities like Ankara and Istanbul.
Yeah, the
Uh,
terrorism, the attacks, and
yeah.
everything, and the way that sitting Prime Minister Abdullah Davutoglu was saying, "Oh, these are increasing our voter percentages and stuff," but so
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, he really needs that little power pockets. Now he's reaching out. I think even a smaller party, Fazilet Party, Erbakan's...
That part.
Yes, and
Yeah.
that created a
So,
bit of strife within the party. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't want to talk a lot about the politics, but that is a very, very key thing. That is where actually, in absence of Gulen, he has, of course, monopoly of a certain segment of society. There is no one to divide that, but that is not enough, and especially Abdullah Gulen, Abdullah Gül, Ahmet Davutoglu, and the other ex-ministers
good.
setting up their own party, Deva Party, and others. It creates a lot of problems. That all those 1%, 2% here and there makes his power very, very shaky. I mean, with the correct candidate, he may lose the next coming election, but who knows? Anyway, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was a nice program. I know in India it is like, what, 11 o'clock, midnight?
Coming to 12, the midnight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we should put a local time.
Then,
And maybe next week we may talk something else. Maybe people will offer some topics in the comment section, and we will continue from there. And today,
mm-hmm.
I think today we make it very clear that this is going to be a co-hosted program. Maybe to prove that next time we'll get a visitor and question him. Like,
Sure. Yeah, that'll be a great idea.
okay.
Mhm.
Well, thank you
All
very
right.
much, everybody, watching and joining us and liking the video, commenting about it, asking your questions. Hopefully, we'll see you in the next time in Hizmet Talks with Behzad, Fatmi, and me, Ismail Sezgin. We'll be here again, and see you next time.